Good evening. I declare the agenda briefing forum of the 11th of February 2025 held in Council Chambers at Level 2, 388 Hay Street, open at 5:33 p.m. Welcome everyone. I'll take attendances. There's a couple of councillors who are on approved leave of absence, but we're glad to have you here in any case. Councillor Johnston and Powell. Councillor De Vries is on leave of absence and is therefore not with us this evening. And the other councillors and Mayor are here in person as per normal, which is great to see, so welcome. The entire executive leadership team is also here in person. Welcome to you, and you're accompanied, I see, by a number of staff members who will address and call upon as needed this evening. Are there any disclosures of interest this evening? Councillor O'Connor.
No, it's all right. It seems to work now. I'm not sure, and I apologise, I should have asked earlier whether I need to declare that I'm the council's representative on WMRC. I think I probably do. Yep. I declare that I'm council's representative on WMRC at the moment, deputising for Councillor De Vries. So, in relation to C5.
Okay, thank you. If we need a paper record of that, we'll probably get it before next week. Any other disclosures? Good, we'll move on. There's no approved deputations. I will leave any announcements for next week. Let's get straight into the agenda items. I'll take any questions on agenda item C1. Proposed amendment number 4 to local planning scheme number 5. Councillor Kosovich.
Thank you, Mayor. My question stems from the residents' concerns regarding the likely impact of current residential parking with the advent of the STRAM, or I should say what's the full? Lost my train. Short-term rental accommodation. As we all know, parking throughout the city's residential streets is already at a premium, as evidenced by the hot spotch of cars strewn across street verges, particularly at night. Well, the actual question is, while the impact of parking on will be subject to take-up rates across the city, I need to ask what consideration has been given to the impact of additional cars on these already overcrowded streets? What, if any, mitigation strategies, such as limiting the number of cars allowed to be parked in the street out the front of a particular type of STRA, have been considered, please?
Thank you. I note the author of the report is Manager Planning Services, Anthony Denham. Is this a question best answered by the planning team or technical services, or both? Mr. Denham, perhaps you can kick us off.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen. So with STRA accommodation, it has to be an existing dwelling. So an existing dwelling would have gone through an approval process, which would have included consideration for car parking. Typically for a residential dwelling, 2 car bays would be provided. In relation to on-street parking, the city has parking laws and policies that apply related to parking permits, and they are not available for visitor use. So I guess if there's any ongoing parking impacts, they'll be enforced accordingly.
Thank you. Director of Technical Services, did you or your staff have anything to add to that from your point of view?
Probably the only thing just to add to what Anthony said is really that this extra information that would be accessible through this would be something that the city could use along with our e-permit system to, I guess, assess and make sure that there's not misuse of our e-permits for those parking after hours and outside of usual parking times. So it would probably just give an extra tool to make sure we manage parking on street.
Any other questions, councillors? Councillor White.
Yeah, I suppose it's just to understand our options here. The state government wants us to do this, and basically we have to do it. When I look at the options on page 8, we could seek modifications, but with those modifications get up. I guess it seems to me like this is a foregone conclusion. And to what extent do we actually have any powers to say, no, we don't want this, if we don't?
Director of Development Services.
Good question, and through you, Mayor. Essentially what they've done is they've made the changes in the regulations, and our role is to update our planning scheme so it's consistent with those regulations. So yes, in essence, those changes will come into effect. It's about good governance, and if our scheme reads correctly, and it's easier for people to understand, so it doesn't actually conflict with what the regulations say. There is a minor option in the land use classifications that we can provide to unhosted STRAs. So we can have them as advertising required. Essentially what that means is that there is a mandatory advertising requirement if a DA is put in. We've recommended a D designation. It doesn't mean that there won't be advertising, but it's not as of right, because that's a little bit more consistent with our planning strategy, which seeks to reduce red tape. So it won't require advertising if there's no significant discretions. So the main choice that council really has is considering whether the land use should have a mandatory advertising component or discretionary component, and that doesn't take away advertising, it just doesn't mandate it.
Thanks for that. That's much clearer. So is the option 2 of modifications, does that, I mean, as you said, the state government regulation has changed. Does this option 2 then mean that's a change to our planning, that we have a room to move, if you like, for our own procedures? That's the only change here.
In essence, that's correct, yes.
Councillor Burns.
Thank you, birthday boy. What? Just because I've given my copy away, and I haven't read through it, but I haven't read through more details. Well, so what do we need to do to press forward to initiate mandatory advertising?
Manager Planning Services.
Yeah, so the current, as the director mentioned, the current recommendation is that we're recommending that unhosted is a D or discretionary use. A use is a discretionary use that requires mandatory advertising. It doesn't mean we can't advertise a D use, but in council's resolution we could amend the D allocation to an A allocation.
I'm just trying to get my mind around that. I worry that hosted and unhosted becomes a grey area. Somebody might say they're hosting and then be not. So I'll pose the question again. What do I need? Do I need to put up an alternative or something before before then to say I want everything captured, that it has to be advertised?
Mr. Petrovsky.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Yeah, the simplest way is an amendment through this OCM process before next week, just requesting that the land use designation is changed from a D to an A use, and we can talk about that offline or through email if that's something that you'd like to do.
Thank you, and I would.
Any other questions? Okay, I think we can move on. Thank you. C2, the electricity supply for contestable sites. Any questions on C2, councillors? Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mayor. Firstly, I'd like to point out that there's a mistake. It's talking about units of kilowatts per hour and those should be kilowatt hours, not kilowatts per hour. I'm an engineer, it's important to me. Secondly, it's talking about contestable sites. It says 6 were considered for the new contract. This is at the top of page 12. It's not clear to me whether the Palms is included or is not included now, because it talks about it having an NMI being established, allowing it to be rolled into the contract. So is it in or out?
Major planning services.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen. So it hasn't been included, but it can be rolled in. There is an option to roll it in. Yep.
Happy with that? Further questions?
Yeah, there's another one. I asked about table 2 goes costs of the recommended option, fallback 1 and fallback 2. I asked for a baseline for if none of those were taken for the open market price, and Emma sent me one which showed that the total, including offset cost, would be 1.1 million, making it the second option. And I'm not sure how that fits in with figure 1, which shows that the open market price would be a lot more than that just for the electricity. So I'm a little confused as to whether an open market scheme would be less expensive than fallback 1 and 2 or more expensive.
Director Corporate Services, is that something you're able to answer or you want to pick up? No. Okay, we'll stick with Mr. Denham. Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen. So, yeah, the Director of Corporate Services did just distribute an updated table to councillors this afternoon. So in that table, the reference to open market is for non-renewables. So that was just to provide a comparison of estimated costs relative to the 3 WALGA offers that are being available. Obviously, that would require additional costs through offsets, which is about $38,000. These are all estimates, by the way, as well, because we can't necessarily predict the power consumption, but it is relatively similar. But obviously, that wouldn't help with going towards target 2 of the city's corporate carbon reduction plan.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted a baseline to compare these things against.
Councillor White.
Yes, I'm sorry, just trying to comprehend correctly fallback offer 1 and 2. 1 is if 100% uptake isn't achieved, then requires 65%, and fallback 2 also requires 65%. So when do you know fallback 1 hasn't worked and you go to fallback 2? How does that? Oh, maybe I'm just misunderstanding it.
So fallback 2 is more advantageous. Fallback 1 is more advantageous, better pricing. I guess at the point at which we'll know, I think a number of other local governments are going through this process at the moment. So they have to basically sign on in the next couple of weeks. So we have looked at a number of council meetings and a number of those local governments that have signed on the MOU. It's about 53 local governments through WALGA. A number of them have already agreed to progress this. So we're hopeful that we'll get to 65 or higher.
Yeah, again, it really might be me. If you don't get 100%, then the fallback is 65, and then it could be 1 or 2 at 65%. What determines whether you go to 1 or 2? I'm sorry, I'm just not understanding that.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. We'll have a look at those figures because I think that might be a typo because they both reference 65%. Yeah, so we'll double check that and get back to you.
Because it would make sense if the second offer was lower than 65%, I guess, and then you would, yeah, that's right. Okay, thank you, at least, yeah. If I may, do we, from a governance point of view, I guess, it's, we refer in the officer recommendation that in point 2, the city accepts the fallback offers, but they're not in the recommendation what those offers are. do we need to say what they are? Because it just seems that, again, well, in this case, there may or may not be a typo, but whether we need to stipulate what our fallbacks are, because otherwise you'd have to come back to council, I imagine.
Given the governance aspect, yeah. CEO, please.
So as I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, fallbacks have been determined what they're going to be. So a council resolution must stand on its own, and we sort of know what those fallbacks are now. So if council thought they needed more clarity on that, we could expand the resolution so it provides clarity. But the fallback offers are known now. So, and it's been a process that WALGA have been followed through in a similar way that happened was about 3 or 4 years ago, I think, the first one, and that was fully subscribed, so that 100% were in fact, I think more than that signed up. So, so I think it's a tried and true process. There's clarity around what those fallback positions are. And so therefore, I have confidence in it, but if council thought it was better to be more prescriptive, we could be.
Last question, I think. Of course, if it was any other option 4, that would then have to come to council. There's no option 4 there. What I mean is if fallback 1 and 2 don't work, then it would be coming back.
Yeah, Director Development Services.
Thank you. So there's essentially a couple of options. There's the officer recommendation, and that includes the recommended offer from WALGA, the 2 fallback offers. And then the second option is that we don't have a renewable energy supply arrangement. So in that case, we wouldn't have to come back to council. There's provisions in the legislation that the city and the CEO can pay for the bills as necessary.
Councillor Jones.
Sorry, I'd just like to come back to this. I want to be clear on what the options are. Option 1 is that we get the the recommended offer. That's great. That's the cheapest option out there. If I understand what the director was saying, the second cheapest option would be we just buy on the open markets and pay the carbon credits. That would maintain our carbon neutral status, but it wouldn't give us the 100% renewable energy, and it wouldn't achieve targets 2 or 5. That would be the second cheapest option. The third cheapest option would be fallback 1, and so that's the third price, and then the most expensive is fallback 2. Is that correct?
Director Development Services.
Yes, with a caveat. The caveat is that the electricity pricing is based on modelling. In an open market, you're more susceptible to price increases, which we have seen. So there are minor price variations. And the third caveat is that the cost of offsets may go up or down. So yes, with caveats.
I'll ask a follow-up about that, and it just comes back to the options that are recommended. It seems like it's an either-or proposition. Either we accept the officer recommendation or we don't. In which case we just keep buying energy, I suppose, the way that we have been up until now. But that
We go back to the old way.
Right. Okay. Where I was going with my question, though, was there was also a mention of buying the offsets. Is that included in our current practice, or do we need an avoidance of doubt resolution if we don't accept the officer recommendation in its exact form? I'll take an answer from anyone. Mr. Denham.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen. So we still need to buy offsets in any event. Just to clarify, I would provide some additional comments to what the director said. So one of the targets for the city's corporate carbon reduction plan, I think it's target 2, talks about 100% renewable energy. By doing anything other than one of the three options, that would be contrary to that. So, we still will need to buy offsets in some form or another, but at a reduced amount, depending on what path it is.
But I can jump in for clarity. For the last 3 years, we've been purchasing the green power, the wind power, which has made a dramatic change in the emissions. And so we would be going back to the previous agreements, which we did prior to 2021, I think, which is where we didn't buy the green power. So that 2021 agreement was the first time local government had put the consortium together. And so this is now the revised negotiations. Obviously, prices increased across the board for energy across the world. And so this is the new modelling and what was required to get these prices, hence why there's fallback positions if certain capacity is not delivered within that. So if we went back to prior to 2021, then we wouldn't meet that target, or wouldn't even go close. But in addition to that, we'd need to buy some additional carbon offsets to be able to remain carbon neutral certified, as we have since 2019.
Councillor Powell?
I was going to try and give you a birthday present and not ask any questions. Look, there's been quite a bit of discussion about it, but for clarification, with the options 1 and 2, if we don't go with option 1, then we're really not acting. Are we acting in alignment with our policy on being carbon neutral? And if we're not, how much is it going to cost us if we don't go with option 1 and don't fulfil our own policies?
I mean, the first part of your question's quite just a sage observation, isn't it? That if we don't follow the recommendation, we're not following our own policies. I suppose we'll ask staff, is that correct? And as for the second part of Councillor Powell's question, I think it speaks for itself. Mr. Denham.
Sorry, I missed the second part of the question, Councillor Powell.
Well, fortunately, Director of Development Services caught it all. Mr. Petrovski.
Thank you. And in regard to your second part of the question about the difference in cost, the WALGA recommended offer is the first offer is actually the cheapest. So that's actually a good thing because it's the cheapest and it aligns with our targets and our corporate carbon reduction plan. So there is about a 60,000, maybe a bit more difference. It was in an email that was sent around today. So, within about $60,000, $70,000, option 1 is cheaper than reverting back to just the normal grid power.
Thank you. And just for absolute clarity on the first part of your question, according to the officer report, if we didn't adopt the recommendation, we'd be acting in consistency with our strategic community plan, our corporate carbon reduction plan, and our sustainability and resilience strategy. So thank you for the question. Councillors, any other questions? I think we can move on then to C3, the 2025 Local Government Ordinary Election. Any questions on C3? I'll take that as a no. We'll move along then to C4, which relates to the 2024 annual electors meeting of the 5th of December 2024. Any questions on that agenda item? Councillor White.
Yeah, thank you. I see that the recommendation is just this, that we receive the minutes and, of course, note the electors' motion. I guess I'm just wondering whether or not enough attention's been given to the motion that was put. It suggests that a report's been done, but there's not a report in the annexes or anything. There's a comment in the main report here for the agenda. But I guess I'm wondering, the motion was to investigate the user experience and user interface and how this could better facilitate better adoption. And is there a report that shows that investigation's been done?
Director Corporate Services.
Sure, thank you. So I guess what the report is trying to, so from a governance perspective with electors' motions, council may choose to make a decision in relation to electors' motions. You don't have to do anything, or you can choose to carry their motion as it stands, or you can choose to make another decision that kind of relates to the motion if you like. I guess what the report highlights is that if an investigation were to take place, we're trying to sort of preempt that and say we've already substantially looked into the issues that were initially identified with the digital permits platform and address those. We've also had the city's external quality assurer for our digital transformation program have a look at the platform as well and give us some confidence that that it is in a good place. So the report generally tries to highlight that a lot has already been done in helping the council to decide whether a further investigation would be warranted.
CEO.
Yeah, just to sort of take that a little bit further. So you may recall on the 16th of July, we did an update in 2024 on the digital transformation project and included by our external quality controller, Olaf Goy from G Square, some analysis on the implementation and how we could incorporate that within phase 2 of the digital transformation, which is there's 3 council resolutions to proceed with that project, and therefore that's the number 1 priority, which is what we're trying to reflect here. So we have done the analysis on the improvements made to date. They've been provided to elected members almost monthly for some time. And in addition to that, the feedback from G Square was essentially around, look, you should continue to focus on your digital transformation and deliver that in the first instance. Learn the lessons from the opportunities there, which we've incorporated in phase 2. So we've got a range of different things that we're doing now in terms of testing the customer experience with all the digital services that are going to be rolled out from 1 July and beyond that. And we'll be updating, I think we've got another workshop scheduled maybe in March. And so, and in addition to that, there's a little bit of movement in terms of mergers, acquisitions, etc., that's going on in that Easy Park space as well. And therefore, it was felt that the offering would likely continue to improve. And finally, in terms of the analysis that we provided through the reports each time we've done an update, is in addition to the functions that have been improved over time, but also that we went from where there was a number of complaints, particularly early on, but that was more around our unique experience in Subi and why we had to do things slightly different than everywhere else. But those user experience also, there'd be less queries, less questions, less training required since probably about March, April of last year. So, and we've had some, so that's why it's not that we haven't considered to do another review, it's that we've done several reviews and we've provided that information to elected members along the way. So at this stage, we think it's important for council to, or for the city, actually to implement the digital transformation as council resolved to on 3 occasions.
Councillor White.
Yeah, thank you. That's helpful. I suppose what I'm thinking here is that it's then, having this motion before us or recommendation before us, it's up to us to determine, because I fully appreciate what you've described in terms of the updates that we are getting. But the fact that this came in was December from the public, who obviously aren't privy to a lot of those things that you described, it seems to me we could just note it and wave it by and say, yeah, this is what they asked for and it's being done and they should be happy with that, or whether it requires something which says, no, for the sake of the electors, for the public, we should put something together which shows the interface has been improved and some of those things. I guess what I'm saying is I'm seeing this as something that the public is asking for, and we could note and say, look, it's all been done, it's all fine, or we could say, we should prepare a document based on the sorts of updates that you've described, because I certainly agree we've had those updates and we are privy to them, but not everyone is. And whether or not this seems to me to be an appeal from the public to say, has this been worth it?
Well, I mean, to go to the core of your question, Councillor White, yeah, it is up for Council to consider whether this recommendation is sufficient or not. Director of Corporate Services.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. I guess what we tried to do in the report is highlight the various improvements that have been made, just to make that really transparent to the public, because you're right, they haven't been privy to all of the updates that we have provided to the elected members. So really tried to pull out everything that's been done. And the key is as well that if any member of the public feels like the platform isn't working for them, that they should provide that feedback to us, and we will act on it. But, the feedback from the team is that we haven't had any substantial feedback on the platform. I think I saw maybe one request around, I don't know, resetting a password or something in the last, when I had a look at the inquiries as well. So that is kind of the proof in the pudding to us as well, that it seems to be working well. So it's, just some additional information to help you to weigh up the merit of, putting additional effort into a further report.
Any other questions? Councillor Jones.
I have a few issues with this this item. There seems to be some equivocation going on in parts of this. For example, one of the bullet points talks about the Easy Park e-permit system being adopted by a number of institutions. We're not talking about that system here. That's irrelevant. It's nothing to do with it. We're talking about a completely different system, which is the digital permit system, which has nothing to do with the system on your phone. They might have been written by the same people, but that's independent, and I think that's an irrelevance. And trying to that's my personal opinion. So,
well, yeah, it's an opinion on something that I think has a basis in fact. So maybe if you can speak to the factual aspect,
I recognise
without having a debate across the floor. Well, we'll just take some advice from the CEO, and then we'll continue with the line of questioning.
We're not referring to this separate Easy Park. We're referring to the visitor permit type that they're trying to on-sell to other local governments. So although the rules may be different, we are talking about the application that we're talking about. We're not talking about the separate application that is used to park your time in, any of our car parks. Okay.
Yeah, for example, where you say...
It talks about the e-permit system there, but other times it talks about the digital permit system, so you're using different terms and it's confusing to me. All right. The other thing is we're talking... Now, my understanding from this is that the recommendation is that we don't distract resources from the digital transformation, which is fair enough. There's an implication that the digital transformation may take over some of this digital parking stuff in future. Is that just an implication that I'm picking up? And it's not part of that they plan to remain as independent systems? Is there a long-term goal of maybe integrating them somehow? This is relevant to me in terms of, if they're always going to remain independent, then maybe we do want to get some sort of feedback on this. If it's more short term, we're planning to migrate that functionality into the digital transformation, then there's less of an issue there. So that's why I'm interested in it from that point of view.
Thanks, Councillor Jones. If I can just supplement your question, my understanding was that there would be two separate systems based on previous workshops, and that we'll take learnings from e-permits or Easy Park, or the app made by Easy Park known as e-permits, or however we want to describe it tonight, and we'd take those learnings and address those as part of the broader digital transformation. But CEO, you're the, I suppose, executive sponsor of the digital transformation. Maybe you could clarify that for us, please.
Yeah, thank you. So phase 2 I am, so Lynette was for phase 1. But now she's a customer because she looks after customer service and requests. So it wasn't good for her to be the sponsor, so I'm the sponsor for this year. We think it's likely that at this stage, and there's only a few providers of this type of application, that it's likely that it'll stay where it is for the short term. A number of applications, and that's the council resolution, was basically go from multiple systems to one system. predominantly for everything that is possible. Not everything is possible. So, for example, one that we haven't been able to do is forestry yet, but that will be done. So that's why Lynette's division or directorate was created, the business improvement, because there'll be many applications and spreadsheets and a whole range of other things that we will finally implement after phase 2 and phase 3 of this digital transformation, because the system is so huge. And we're looking at the Duncans on the parking side integration and a whole range of other things that will be in that. But I think for this application, it's likely to stay for this for a period of time. So the reason why we're suggesting we've got the council resolutions, 3 of them to complete this project, and then we've got the business improvement, and then we'll be bringing those back each year to council around budget time to say these are the projects in the, I think we're going to call it a pipeline because it probably never ends. This is what we think should be funded to improve the experience across all the different types of applications. And some will be integration, some will be where, and it's not unusual, Technology One, for example, they quite often do buy businesses like Jeff Rorter and Associates, and that's where the asset and strategic asset management within Tech One came. Tech One didn't have a document management system, they bought DataWorks. They didn't have a planning application, they bought, I can't remember. Anyway, so where that is likely to go is that if Technology One continue to acquire, and if they would acquire this business, for example, unlikely, or a different business that had this application, then part of the business improvement would be for us then to implement that solution. So it may well be possible in the future, but just in the foreseeable future, unlikely.
My question will approach this from a slightly different angle, and that is that the answers that I'm hearing sound to me like the city has already considered user experience and how things might be better facilitated in future. But the issue is that the public wouldn't have visibility of those considerations that have happened up until now. So I suppose it's maybe a question for Director of Corporate Services or perhaps the CEO, given that you have control over the agenda. Why not put this all into a report and say that the city has considered these matters and notes the report? Because I think the danger in presenting the information this way is that you'll have potentially councillors, potentially members of the public who say, oh, you didn't do anything with the electors' motion, you've just noted it. But if I listen to the answers that are being given this evening and I read the comment, which is actually pretty substantial as far as comments go and is almost a report in itself, it seems to me that we've almost already done the work, but it just needs to be presented differently. I just wonder if either of you two have a perspective on that.
I suppose that's what we were trying to illustrate in the comment in the report, is that the work has essentially been done, and we were trying to really expose that work to the general public, so to mitigate the need to do further work because it kind of already has been done. If there's any way that you think it could be better presented, I suppose we're all ears. CEO, I don't know if you have any further comments.
I probably don't, in terms of, it's one of those things that to what extent do you provide detailed information in a council report in that regard. So it's one of those things we've been conscious. I think when I first got here, some of the agendas were, the attachments were over 1,000 pages themselves. So we've sort of been conscious to try and reduce the amount that goes in the council reports for both the community and yourselves in terms of the analysis. So it was just a judgment call that we made, trying to provide the community and yourselves with enough information. Obviously, we provided you a lot more through the journey because you receive monthly updates in that regard. I take the point that Councillor White, etc., that the public don't have access to those, but we didn't want to also capture all of that within this report. We felt that might be overkill, but maybe we can take that away and rethink about how we can present the information to give confidence to both council and the community that that this matter has been taken seriously. An enormous amount of work has been done, and that the reason why we've made this officer recommendation is more around that the work has been done, and we know the limitations and we know sort of where we're at. And at this point in time, to switch to something else, given where we are, would not be appropriate.
Thank you. Councillor Johnston, not Councillor Johnston, O'Connor. And then we'll go back to Councillor White.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor McMullen. There's quite a long list there of key updates that have been achieved and progressed, which indicates the sort of significant work that was done in response to the feedback. And it then goes on, the report goes on to say that you're continuing to work with Easy Park. Is the scale of amendments and issues that you're working on now as extensive? Is there any sense of scale of ongoing work? I'm not necessarily expecting it all to be listed here, because it may be an ongoing thing, but it would be useful to have some sense of scale of that ongoing work.
That'd be best answered by someone in the Technical Services Directorate, wouldn't it? Acting Manager. Okay, he needs a new nameplate. Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, and through you. Look, the short answer is that yes, Easy Park is still working diligently at improving the service. What's really good is that a lot of other local governments, universities, organisations are kind of jumping on board the e-permit system, and they're all feeding back all the time their suggestions, their wants, their needs. So now what's happening is that the system is being improved, not just by the input that we're giving them, but by the input that they're receiving nationally, globally. So look, there is still a lot of improvements to be made. They're constantly working on those improvements with releases released certainly every couple of weeks, if not every month. And we meet with Easy Park on a monthly basis at the moment, sometimes a couple of times each month, just to go through, I guess, the issues and to kind of get updates on what they're looking at and how they're approaching it.
Councillor White. Any other questions from councillors? Okay, we'll move on. C5, the self-supporting loan for Western Metropolitan Regional Council. Councillor O'Connor.
Yes, Mayor McMullen. In view of my being the delegate standing in for Councillor De Vries, I believe I have a financial interest because my position on WMRC is a paid position, and therefore, out of an excess of caution, I should probably absent myself from this discussion.
Well,
but
I mean, that's always a decision for you, but can we just confirm what the criteria for a financial interest is? Wouldn't Councillor O'Connor need to... I mean, wouldn't this decision need to have a bearing on whether essentially Councillor O'Connor gets paid or not? I mean, she'll get her allowance in any case.
I think, just scratching my memory, I think that we might have looked into this previously quite some time ago. It might have been in relation to Councillor Stroud, but I can't recall the answer because it gets a little bit complicated. I get the feeling that it is a bit more on the exempt side, but we decided to stay on the safe side at that time. I don't know if anybody else has a clear memory.
Well, look, in the time it took to answer my question, you probably could have left the room. We could have fielded all the questions. We could have called you back. The decision would be, well, if there was a financial interest, the decision would be, do we let her stay in any case or not? But I mean, the threshold question is there a financial interest? And we'll just square that away for next week. There's no vote to be had because there's no standing orders tonight. There's just gentlemen's agreements, really. There's no rules otherwise.
I think we're saying sit down. Yeah.
Well, just step out just in case. Just in case. We'll get some governance advice and we'll have the answer for next week. Are there any questions on C5? Someone just ask one. No. Okay, someone please get Councillor O'Connor. Okay, well, that brings us to the last agenda item this evening, at this evening's briefing, the C6, the financial statements and reports for the month ending the 31st of December 2024. Councillor Johnston, maybe?
Yes, thank you, through you, Mayor. I was looking at the summary of major debtor categories and the infringement debtors over 4 months, which is pretty significant. I'm just wondering, if anyone's got some comments around that and the amount and recovery. Thanks.
Director Corporate Services or Manager Financial Services? I'll take either.
There we go. Thank you, through the chair. In relation to our outstanding debtors other than rates, so recently I've been doing a review of our financial services team and our tasks, and one thing that has been noted is debt collection outside of the rates area. So as part of a bit of a review of our services and what roles and responsibilities are done within each position, I've allocated task of debt collection on sundry debtors, which includes infringements. So we should start making some progress on our sundry debtors outside of rates on our debt collection. In relation to infringements, though, a lot of our infringements get referred to fines and enforcements. So there's not a lot that us as the city can do on those. There is legislation that governs when particular debts after a certain age can be written off, but our fines go to fines and enforcements for recoveries.
Thanks for that. And the quantity of that, the infringements over 4 months, is there anything more we can be doing to recoup those before they end up going to, get it beyond our remit?
That one I'd need to get back to you on to review our current process and what we're doing, but I don't think there is a lot of time between when we issue the fine, when it's due, and then when we push it across to FIR. But I'm happy to get back to you on that one.
Yeah, it is a bit of a common issue in local government. The infringements can be quite difficult to recover, and you do need to refer them onto FIR. I have inquired with, and I don't know if James has anything to add, with technical services previously, and the manager of health and compliance has now left. In terms of are we doing everything that we can, and it did appear, I don't have the answers in front of me that he provided, but it did appear that they were doing what we could. But the unfortunate reality is there's only so much we can do in relation to those infringements, and as you will see from the numbers, they are by far and away the greatest proportion of those outstanding debts beyond 4 months.
The other question I had was relating to the budgeted, what have I got here? $437,334 lower than budgeted interest revenue due to timing of investment maturities, and $228,288 lower than expected other revenue due to timing of charges recovered from tenants of city-owned lease properties. And I'm just wondering, with accrual accounting, why is that happening? Thanks.
Yeah, so one of the common issues that we have with reporting of local government finances is timing. So, often when we do the budget, we don't know exactly when we're going to invest, in each term deposit and how much, for example. A lot of them are on a 3-month basis. And so we kind of estimate equal apportionment across the year in terms of when we're going to earn that interest income. But it doesn't always happen exactly that way. It can be lumpy depending on how much we put in when and how much we redeem when. And the same goes for leases as well. So with the digital transformation that we're going through at the moment, we're looking at ways of improving the phasing of those things. So we should be able to, for example, put in there very neatly when our lease payments are due. When our loan payments are due, things around, term deposits and when you invest, you still don't really know in advance. You don't have a crystal ball when you form your budget. But essentially all those issues are just timing related.
Perhaps just if I could jump in, for elected members and the public, one of the things that's important in terms of the timing and phasing of budgets, etc., or profiling of budgets per month, and comparing that, the analysis that staff are trying to achieve as well by using the word timing is probably flagging to you that you shouldn't really have any concerns at this stage in relation to achieving the budget. And if we were to say real, that would mean that we'd need to do a budget adjustment at some stage in relation to that. So that's sort of the focus. If there's a real issue, it means it's not going to reach its budget on either, or going to go over budget on expenditure or under budget on revenue, and then that would be dealt with through the half-year budget review as well to adjust either those revenues up or down or the expenditures up and down.
Any other questions on C6? Okay, next week there'll be a couple of additional agenda items, but those reports or officer comments on motions aren't ready yet. So I think that brings tonight's agenda briefing to a close. Thanks, councillors, for all your questions, and thank you, staff, for your advice.